The Galaxy Council never anticipated Earth to strike back part. The stars above Luna Base glittered cold and distant, indifferent to the tension building inside the observation dome. Inside, Earth's last hope for peaceful negotiation sat stiffly in a circle of chairs that felt more like a courtroom than a council chamber. Paul Dawson adjusted his collar for the third time in as many minutes. He wasn't a soldier or a general. He was a diplomat trained to speak softly and listen carefully. But today, he felt like a schoolboy called before a strict headmaster. Across from him, Ambassador Corin Vex of the Galactic Concord lounged with practiced ease, his long silver robes shimmering under the dome's soft lights. His four-fingered hands rested on his knees, and his pale eyes scanned the humans with mild boredom, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Lena Ruiz stood near the back, arms crossed, her dark eyes sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses. She wasn't supposed to speak unless asked, but she had insisted on coming. As Earth's lead Xenocomms analyst, she had spent the last 6 months studying every scrap of data from the Concord's arrival. She knew their language, their protocols, even the rhythm of their pauses, and she knew with quiet certainty that they saw humans as little more than clever animals. Curious, perhaps, but not dangerous. The Concord had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Their fleet, sleek and silent, had slid into orbit without warning. No greetings, no hails, just a single transmission. Comply or be isolated. Earth's government, still fractured by old rivalries and new fears, had scrambled to respond. The United Nations had called an emergency session. Russia, China, the African Union, the Americas, they all argued, bargained, and finally agreed on one thing. They couldn't fight this. Not yet. So they sent Paul with Lena as his technical advisor to Luna Base, the only neutral ground left in near-Earth space. Corin Vex cleared his throat, a dry, clicking sound. "The Concord has been patient," he said, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "Your world has been granted observer status for the last 2 standard cycles, yet you have failed to meet even the most basic requirements for integration." Paul leaned forward slightly. "Ambassador, Earth is not refusing integration. We're asking for time. Our planet is home to nearly 10 billion people across thousands of cultures. Unifying under a single voice doesn't happen overnight." Vex's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Time is a luxury for equals. You are not our equal. You lack unified governance, stable energy infrastructure, and the ethical maturity to handle advanced technologies. The Concord does not negotiate with children." A murmur rose from the small group of human delegates. Paul held up a hand to quiet them. "We understand your concerns, but we've made progress. We've shared atmospheric data, geological surveys, even cultural archives. Isn't that worth something?" "It is data," Vex replied coolly. "Not trust. Trust is earned through obedience. The Concord requires immediate access to your lithium-7 deposits in the Andes, your helium-3 reserves on the Moon, and full oversight of your orbital defense grid. Refusal will result in your designation as a non-compliant world. That means no trade, no communication, no assistance, ever." Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Lena's jaw tightened. She knew what that meant. Cut off from galactic networks, Earth would be stranded in its own solar system, watching other species leap ahead while humanity stagnated. Worse, without access to Concord medical tech or energy solutions, millions would suffer. Paul took a slow breath. "And if we agree, then you will be placed under provisional stewardship for 50 cycles. Your governments will answer to a Concord overseer. Your military will be reduced to ceremonial status. In time, you may earn full membership." Vex's tone made it clear that "in time" could mean centuries. Paul glanced at Lena. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. He understood. This wasn't negotiation. It was surrender dressed in polite words. Still, Paul nodded slowly. "We will consider your terms." Vex stood, his robes flowing like liquid metal. "Consider quickly. The Concord does not wait." He turned and walked out, his entourage following in perfect silence. As soon as the door hissed shut, the room erupted. Voices overlapped, angry, scared, desperate. But Paul didn't join them. He walked to the observation window and stared down at Earth, a blue and white marble hanging in the black. So fragile, so full of life. Lena joined him. "He recorded everything," she said quietly, tapping a small device hidden in her sleeve. "Every word, every tone shift. I've already started analyzing their comms frequency. There's a pattern in their encryption, repetitive, almost lazy. Like they never expected anyone to try to listen in. Paul looked at her. You think we can use it? I don't know yet. But if they think we're just going to roll over, they've never studied human history. She gave a small, fierce smile. We've been pushed to the edge before. We always find a way back. Down on Earth, in hidden labs and quiet garages, in military bunkers and university basements, people were already waking up. News of the Concorde's ultimatum spread fast. Not through official channels, but through whispers, encrypted messages, and late-night calls. A retired engineer in Detroit began sketching drone modifications on napkins. A hacker in Manila started probing for gaps in orbital surveillance. A former pilot in Nairobi dusted off old flight manuals. No one declared war. No one shouted defiance. But something had shifted. The humiliation had lit a spark, not of rage but of resolve. Back on Luna, Paul sent a coded message to every contact he trusted. They think we're weak. Let them keep thinking that. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time in weeks he felt something close to hope. The Concorde had come expecting silence, obedience, fear. They got all three, at least on the surface. What they didn't see was the quiet hum of minds working in the dark, the steady beat of hearts refusing to break. Earth had bent, but it hadn't broken, and sometimes that was enough to start a revolution. The Galaxy Council never anticipated Earth to strike back. 2 weeks passed after the Luna Summit, and on the surface, Earth obeyed. Mining permits were signed. Orbital defense stations powered down. Concorde inspectors walked through government offices with smug confidence, checking boxes on digital tablets as if humanity were a misbehaving pet finally learning its place. But beneath that calm surface, something else was growing, quiet, fast, and determined. In a repurposed subway tunnel beneath Chicago, Nate Brooks wiped grease from his hands and stared at a flickering hologram of the Mars Supply Depot. He wasn't supposed to be here. Officially, he was retired, kicked out of orbital command after refusing a direct order to stand down during a near miss with a rogue satellite. But now that same stubbornness made him valuable. The underground network had found him through old contacts, and he hadn't said no. Around him, a dozen people worked in focused silence. Some were former soldiers. Others were students, mechanics, or coders who'd never held a weapon. What they shared was anger, and a belief that Earth didn't have to kneel forever. We've got 3 drones ready, said a young woman named Zoe, her fingers flying over a cracked tablet, all retrofitted with Maya's pulse modulators. Range is limited, but if we launch from the belt's shadow zone, they'll be invisible until it's too late. Nate nodded. Good, we're not trying to destroy anything. Just make a point. The plan had come together slowly, like pieces of a puzzle no one knew they were solving. After the summit, Lena Ruiz had sent encrypted fragments of Concorde comms data to trusted allies worldwide. One of those fragments landed in the inbox of Maya Patel, a quantum systems expert working out of a converted warehouse in Mumbai. She'd spent sleepless nights decoding the patterns, and what she found shocked her. The Concorde's short-range networks used a predictable handshake protocol. It was efficient, clean, and vulnerable to a precisely timed burst of electromagnetic noise. Maya didn't build weapons. She built silence. A silence that could blind sensors, scramble targeting systems, and leave even the most advanced ship drifting like a confused bird in a storm. Her first test was small, a dummy satellite in low orbit. She sent a signal from her rooftop array, and for exactly 4.7 seconds the satellite vanished from every tracking system on Earth. When it reappeared, its log showed total system reset. No damage, just confusion. That was all Nate needed now. The real target was the Concorde supply depot orbiting Mars. It wasn't a warship, just a floating warehouse storing fuel, spare parts and rations for Concorde patrols in the outer system. But it was symbolic, and it was lightly guarded. The team called themselves Echo, not a name, just a signal. A whisper that Earth was still listening. In Lagos, a group of engineers modified old weather satellites into relay nodes. In Buenos Aires, hackers rerouted civilian data streams to mask Echo's signals. In Jakarta, a retired aerospace engineer named Derek Lang built launch cradles from scrap metal and repurposed rocket casings. No one knew everyone. Trust was layered, compartmentalized. If one cell fell, the others could keep going. Nate checked the final checklist. 3 drones, 1 launch window, 1 chance. Remember, he said, his voice low but firm. We don't fire weapons. We don't hurt anyone. We just show them we can reach out and touch their perfect little system. Zoe gave a sharp nod. They think we're deaf and dumb. Let's give them static. The launch happened at Oro 300 UTC. From a hidden platform in the Pacific, 3 slender drones shot into the sky, riding on silent ion thrusters. They didn't follow standard trajectories. Instead, they wove through debris fields and old satellite graveyards, using Earth's magnetic field and solar wind to mask their heat signatures. Maya's jamming sequence was loaded into each drone's core, a digital ghost designed to slip past conquered firewalls and whisper chaos into their networks. 2 days later, the drones reached the Mars depot. Inside the Concord station, Ensign Relis was sipping nutrient broth when the lights flickered. Alarms stayed silent, no breach, no attack, but every screen went blank for 5 seconds. When they returned, navigation logs showed errors. Comms were scrambled. The automated resupply shuttle, mid-docking, froze in place, its thrusters cutting out. Panic spread fast. Technicians ran diagnostics, but the systems kept resetting. It wasn't sabotage in the traditional sense, no explosions, no malware. Just a sudden, inexplicable silence where there should have been order. Back on Earth, Nate watched the feed from a stolen Concorde maintenance cam. He saw the confusion, the frantic hand signals, the way the depot's commander kept demanding answers no one could give. He didn't smile. This wasn't victory. It was a message. Within hours, the incident was reported to the Galactic Concord Council. Corin Vex dismissed it as a minor systems glitch, likely caused by solar interference. But others weren't so sure. Security logs showed no solar flares, and the timing, just weeks after Earth's surrender, felt too neat. Paul Dawson, still playing the obedient diplomat, expressed deep concern during a follow-up meeting and offered Earth's technical assistance to help investigate. Vex refused coldly, but Paul saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Meanwhile, Maya received a new message from an unknown source inside the conquered fleet. Just 3 words, "You were heard," she didn't reply. But she saved the message. In the weeks that followed, small things kept happening. A Concorde patrol near Jupiter lost comms for 12 minutes. A data buoy near Saturn rebooted itself 3 times in one night. Each event was minor, deniable. But together, they painted a picture. Someone was testing the edges of the Concorde's control, and that someone was human. Nate's team grew. Not in size, but in reach. Farmers in Kenya shared drone parts disguised as irrigation equipment. Fishermen in Vietnam carried encrypted drives in waterproof cases. School teachers in Oslo taught students how to spot surveillance drones. Not to fight them, just to notice. The Concorde tightened its grip. Inspectors demanded more access. Patrols doubled near Earth orbit. But every restriction only fed the resistance. People who once argued over politics or religion now shared tools, codes, and courage. Maya worked day and night, refining her jamming pulses. She discovered that if she layered the signal with harmonic echoes from Earth's own radio history, old broadcasts, music, even children's voices, the Concorde filters couldn't distinguish it from background noise. So the next pulse carried a snippet of a 20th century lullaby, buried deep in the static. Nate smiled when he heard it. "Let them wonder," he said, "what kind of species sings to its enemies." The Concorde still believed Earth was broken, but broken things can still cut. And Earth was sharpening its edges in the dark. No one declared war. No armies marched. But in hidden rooms and quiet nights, humanity was learning to fight not with fire but with silence, with cleverness, with the stubborn refusal to be erased. And the Galaxy Council, for all its power and pride, never saw it coming. The Galaxy Council never anticipated Earth to strike back. Part 3. The Concorde could no longer pretend it was just bad luck. After the Mars depot, 3 more outposts went dark. Briefly, cleanly, without violence but with unmistakable precision. Each time systems froze, comms died, navigation failed, and each time the logs showed the same strange echo, a burst of noise that looked like cosmic static but carried patterns too regular to be natural. Corin Vex stood before the full council, his silver robes tight around his shoulders, and insisted it was coincidence. But the other ambassadors exchanged glances. Coincidence didn't strike 4 different systems across 3 star sectors in under a month. The decision came quickly. A peacekeeping fleet would be sent to Earth's system, not to invade, they claimed, but to restore stability. Commander Jael Torv, a seasoned Varelian officer known for her discipline and cold efficiency, was placed in charge. Her orders were clear: identify the source of the disruptions, neutralize it, and remind Earth of its place. On Earth, news of the fleet's approach spread like wildfire. Governments issued calm statements urging citizens not to panic. But in the underground networks, panic wasn't the mood, it was focus. Nate Brooks gathered his core team in the Chicago tunnel, now reinforced with steel plates and shielded walls. Maps of the asteroid belt glowed on every screen. This was where they'd make their stand. We can't win a fight, Nate said, his voice steady. But we don't have to. We just have to make them look foolish. Maya Patel had spent the last weeks refining her jamming system into something far more clever. Instead of just blocking signals, she could now mimic them. Her new program, which she called Mirror, could trick a ship's sensors into seeing false data. Empty space where a drone was, or a friendly vessel where there was none. Paired with Nate's swarm tactics, it meant they could herd the Concorde fleet like sheep without firing a single shot. Derek Lang, the engineer from Nairobi, had finished modifying a fleet of old orbital cleanup drones. Stripped of their waste collectors, they now carried compact EMP emitters and reflective chaff designed to scatter LiDAR scans. They weren't weapons. They were distractions. And distractions, Maya had learned, were more powerful than bombs when your enemy believed itself invincible. The plan was simple: lure the Concorde fleet into the densest part of the asteroid belt near Ceres. Use Mirror to create phantom signals, making the fleet think human ships were hiding among the rocks. Then unleash the drone swarm, not to attack but to flood their sensors with noise, false targets, and looping comms echoes. The goal wasn't destruction. It was confusion and humiliation. The day the Concorde fleet entered the belt, Earth held its breath. Officially, all human ships were docked. Unofficially, hundreds of eyes watched from hidden satellites, repurposed telescopes, and even modified weather balloons. Commander Torv's lead cruiser, the Iron Keel, moved with slow confidence. Her sensors swept the area. Nothing, just rocks and silence. She ordered a standard patrol pattern: 3 frigates fanning out, 2 support vessels holding position. Then, without warning, her comms panel lit up with a burst of static. A voice, human, calm, and clear, spoke in broken Varelian. "You are not welcome here," Torv snapped orders. "Scan for origin. Lock weapons," but the sensors showed nothing. Then everything. Suddenly, dozens of contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships, drones, even what looked like a small station. The frigates turned, weapons charging, only to find empty space. Before they could reset, another pulse hit. This time, their navigation systems rerouted themselves, sending 2 frigates on a collision course. Alarms blared. Pilots shouted. The ships barely avoided impact, their hulls scraping as they veered apart. Back on Earth, Nate watched the chaos unfold on a grainy feed. "Now," he said. Zoe tapped a key. The drone swarm activated. From hidden crevices in asteroids, from hollowed-out mining pods, from the shadows of dead comets, hundreds of small drones emerged. They didn't fire. They broadcast. Maya's Mirror program flooded the Concorde net with fake IFF signals, identifying each drone as a different human vessel, some even mimicking Concorde codes. The fleet's AI tried to sort friend from foe, but the data kept shifting. A frigate locked onto a hostile, only to find it was its own support ship. Another fired a warning shot at empty space. Within minutes, the entire fleet was tangled in its own systems. Ships drifted in circles, comms filled with overlapping voices, some real, some recorded, some stitched together from old Earth broadcasts. One frigate even played a snippet of a children's song for 17 seconds before its crew could reboot. Commander Torv, face pale with fury, ordered a full retreat. But the retreat itself was compromised. Maya had seeded the exit paths with delayed jamming pulses. As the fleet tried to regroup, their formation broke apart. The Iron Keel ended up leading only 2 escorts. The rest were scattered, blind, and embarrassed. While the fleet floundered, Paul Dawson stood before a global broadcast array. He didn't wear a uniform. He wore a simple suit, the same one he'd worn on Luna, but his voice carried a new weight. "The people of Earth do not seek war," he said, looking straight into the camera. But we will not be treated as less than human. We built our world from dust and dreams. We survived ice ages, plagues, and our own worst impulses. We are not your subjects. We are your equals. And if you come to our home again with threats instead of respect, you will find we are ready. The message was sent on every open frequency, including the Concord emergency band. It played in the cockpits of stranded frigates. It echoed in the halls of the council chamber. And for the first time, other species listened. On the neutral trade world of Keswick, a delegation of insectoid merchants paused their deals to watch the footage. On the ocean moon of Vor, a young scholar rewound Paul's speech 3 times, then shared it with her entire university. Rumors spread. Earth wasn't just resisting, it was winning without bloodshed. Back on Luna, Corin Vex demanded Paul's arrest. But the council hesitated. Public opinion, even among member worlds, was shifting. Mocking memes of Concord ships chasing ghosts circulated on fringe networks. A popular musician on the pleasure planet of Lyra released a song called The Static That Spoke. Nate's team didn't celebrate. They knew this was only the beginning. But as they powered down their systems and vanished back into the tunnels, a quiet pride passed between them. They hadn't fired a weapon. They hadn't killed a soul. But they had made the mighty Concord look small, and somewhere in the dark, Maya smiled as she uploaded one last echo into the void. A recording of Earth's oldest radio broadcast, crackling with age but clear in its message. This is humanity. We are here. The Galaxy Council had expected silence. Instead, they got a voice, and that voice was just getting started. The Galaxy Council never anticipated Earth to strike back part. For the victory in the asteroid belt didn't bring peace, it brought chaos. Within days, the Galactic Concord split at the seams. Member species that had long resented Varelian dominance began questioning the Council's authority. Trade delegations from the Keswick Consortium delayed shipments. The ocean dwellers of Vor recalled their ambassadors. Even neutral systems, once silent, started broadcasting messages of support for Earth. The Concord's image of unity was cracking, and Earth had not fired a single weapon. But on Earth itself, the mood was far from triumphant. Governments argued over what to do next. Some wanted to push harder, to demand full recognition. Others feared the Concord would return with overwhelming force. In emergency meetings held in bunkers beneath Geneva and Beijing, leaders whispered the same fear. What if this was just the calm before the storm? Paul Dawson felt it too. He sat in a dim room in Nairobi, far from the cameras and speeches, listening to reports from every corner of the planet. His message had inspired millions, but inspiration wouldn't stop a fleet of warships. He needed a real solution, not just defiance, but leverage. That's when Lena Ruiz walked in, her eyes tired but bright. She placed a data chip on the table. "We found it," she said. "The Concord's weak point." For weeks, Lena and Maya had been digging deeper into the intercepted comms. They noticed something odd. Every major Concord command, every fleet order, every supply update, every diplomatic signal passed through a single relay node near Proxima Centauri. It wasn't just a hub. It was the central nervous system of the entire Concord military network. Without it, coordination across star systems would collapse into confusion. "It's called the Nexus Core," Lena explained. "Heavily guarded, shielded, and hidden inside a hollowed-out comet. But it's not invincible. Their security assumes no one would even know it exists, let alone reach it." Nate Brooks leaned forward. "So what's the plan? Blow it up?" "No," Maya said, stepping in from the hallway. She looked exhausted but focused. Destroying it would kill thousands of innocent comms workers and trigger total war. "We don't want destruction. We want demonstration." The idea took shape slowly, like a photograph developing in the dark. They wouldn't attack the Nexus Core. They would visit it. Silently. Peacefully. And from its own systems, they would broadcast Earth's final offer to the entire galaxy. It was insane. The core sat deep in Concord-controlled space, surrounded by sensor nets, patrol drones, and automated defense turrets. Getting close would be near impossible. But Maya had an idea. Using the same mirror program that fooled the fleet, they could disguise a small ship as a routine maintenance vessel, one that the Concorde used for internal repairs. The trick would only work for a few minutes, but that might be enough. They needed a crew, small, skilled, willing to risk everything. Derek Lang volunteered first. "I built half the systems on that ship," he said. "I know every bolt." Zoe Kim signed on as comms and navigation, and Nate, after a long silence, agreed to lead the mission. "If we're going to show them we're not savages," he said, "we better act like diplomats with engines." The ship they chose was the Wren, a retired deep space research vessel, barely 50 meters long with no weapons and a hull patched with old solar panels. It looked harmless. That was the point. For 10 days they trained in secret. Maya loaded the Wren's core with a new broadcast module, one that could hijack the Nexus core's own signal and beam Paul's message on every frequency the Concorde used. From military bands to public channels, the message was simple. Earth sought equal standing, not war, and if the Concorde refused, they would find their own network turned against them, not to harm, but to speak. The night before launch, Paul met Nate on the tarmac of a hidden spaceport in the Chilean desert. Stars stretched above them like scattered salt. "If you don't come back," Paul said quietly, "I'll make sure your names are remembered." Nate shook his head. "We're not heroes. We're just people who said no one too many times." The Wren launched at dawn, riding on silent thrusters to avoid detection. It slipped past Earth's orbital monitors, then vanished into the void. For 3 weeks, it traveled through dead zones and debris fields, using old asteroid maps and Maya's signal tricks to stay hidden. The crew spoke little. They checked systems, ate ration bars, and watched the stars drift by. When they finally neared Proxima Centauri, tension filled the cabin. The comet housing the Nexus core loomed ahead, a dark, pockmarked rock spinning slowly in the red glow of its star. Sensor boys floated around it like sleeping guard dogs. "Mirror sequence active," Zoe whispered. The Wren's transponder flickered, then broadcast a Concorde maintenance ID. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a green light blinked on their console. Clearance granted. They had 8 minutes. Derek guided the ship into a docking bay meant for tiny service drones. The moment they touched down, Maya jacked into the core's network through a maintenance port. Her fingers flew across the console. Firewalls fell like paper walls. The Concorde had never imagined an outsider would understand their code, let alone speak it fluently. She uploaded the broadcast. Across the galaxy, every Concorde screen, on warships, in council chambers and homes, flickered. Then Paul Dawson's face appeared. His voice, calm and clear, filled every speaker. "We do not ask for mercy. We ask for respect. Earth stands ready to join the galactic community as equals, not subjects, not children, partners." The message lasted 30 seconds. Then the feed cut out. Alarms blared inside the core. Security teams scrambled. But by then, the Wren was already pulling away. Its disguise gone, its mission done. Back on Earth, people watched in silence as the broadcast replayed on every open channel. In the Concorde Council chamber, Corin Vex stood frozen, his face pale. He had been outmaneuvered not by force but by courage and cleverness. And for the first time, the Galaxy Council understood. Earth wasn't just striking back, it was offering a hand, and if they refused it, they would be the ones left behind. The Galaxy Council never anticipated Earth to strike back part. The broadcast from the Nexus core didn't just echo across the galaxy. It shattered the Concorde's illusion of control. Within hours, every major system received Paul Dawson's message. It played in marketplaces on Keswick, in underwater chambers on Vor, even in the quiet libraries of the silent monks of Lyra Prime. For the first time, the galaxy saw Earth not as a primitive world begging for scraps, but as a species that had stared down an empire and spoken with dignity instead of desperation. Inside the Concorde Council chamber, chaos reigned. Ambassadors shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for emergency talks. Corin Vex stood at the center, his usual calm replaced by a cold fury. But even he could not silence the rising tide of doubt. The fleet that had been preparing to crush Earth now sat idle, its commanders unsure whether to obey orders that might spark a full galactic revolt. Then came the final blow. The Concorde's central fleet, still recovering from the asteroid belt incident, suddenly lost coordination. Without the Nexus core's clean signal, now temporarily scrambled by Maya's upload, ships couldn't confirm orders. Patrol routes overlapped. Supply lines stalled. For 3 critical days, the mighty Concorde military moved like a body with a broken spine. That was all Earth needed. Paul Dawson didn't wait for an invitation. He sent a new message, not to the Council but directly to every member world. He offered open dialogue, shared scientific data, and a proposal for a new assembly where all voices, big or small, would carry equal weight. He didn't mention weapons or victories. He spoke of cooperation, mutual growth, and the simple truth that no species should rule over another. To everyone's surprise, the first to respond was the Keswick Consortium. Their ambassador, a soft-spoken being with iridescent skin, requested a private channel. Then came the VOR delegation. Then 3 more. Within a week, over half the Concord's member systems had signaled support for Earth's proposal. Faced with collapse from within, the Council had no choice. They called an emergency session, and for the first time in centuries they invited a human to speak as an equal. Paul stood before them not in a borrowed suit but in simple Earth-made fabric, his voice steady, his eyes clear. He didn't gloat. He didn't demand. He simply said, "We are ready to build something better, together." The vote was close, but it passed. Earth was granted provisional membership in the newly reformed Galactic Assembly, with full voting rights and no overseers. The resource treaties were cancelled. The orbital restrictions lifted. And the Concord's peacekeeping fleet was ordered to stand down. Back on Earth, there were no parades, no grand celebrations. People gathered in quiet groups in parks and homes and city squares, and simply looked up at the stars with new eyes. They had not won a war. They had earned a seat at the table. Nate Brooks returned from the Wren mission exhausted but unharmed. The ship had barely escaped the Proxima system before Concord patrols closed in, but Maya's final jamming pulse had blinded their sensors just long enough. Now Nate stood on a hill outside Chicago watching sunrise paint the sky in gold and red. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was something new, a guardian of a world that had finally found its voice. Maya Patel turned down offers to lead Earth's new interstellar tech division. Instead, she opened a school in Mumbai teaching young students how to code, how to question, and how to listen, even to silence. The best weapons, she told them, are the ones you never have to use. Derek Lang and Zoe Kim joined a civilian space initiative, designing ships not for war, but for exploration. Their first project was a deep-range probe meant to visit the outer rim worlds, not to claim them, but to say hello. Paul Dawson became Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. He moved to a neutral station near Alpha Centauri, where he spent his days negotiating trade routes, sharing medical knowledge, and quietly reminding other species that strength isn't measured in firepower, but in the courage to stand tall without tearing others down. The Galaxy Council, once feared and absolute, faded into history. In its place rose a new order, one built not on dominance but on dialogue. And at its heart stood Earth not as a conqueror, but as a bridge between old powers and new voices. Years later, when school children across the galaxy studied the Great Shift, they learned about the quiet rebellion that changed everything. Not with bombs, but with brains. Not with hate, but with hope. They learned how a species once dismissed as primitive had used its greatest weapons, ingenuity, unity, and stubborn kindness to rewrite the future. And in the quiet corners of space, the old conquered envoys sometimes admitted, in hushed tones, that they had never seen it coming. They had studied Earth's wars, its divisions, its flaws, but they had missed its soul. For Earth had spent millennia learning how to survive. Now it was learning how to lead. And the stars, once distant and cold, seemed a little closer, a little warmer, as if they too were listening.